question number 5, Pam Gossel.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what impact the Scottish Government anticipates that the Supreme Court judgment regarding For Women Scotland Limited versus the Scottish Minister will have on the implementation of the public sector equality duty in Scotland.
First Minister.
President Officer, the Scottish Government accepts the Supreme Court's judgment. This Government is committed to protecting everyone's rights, including through effective implementation of the public sector equality duty. We continue to take forward a phased programme of improvement to the operation of the public sector equality duty in Scotland and, of course, will consider the impact of the Supreme Court's ruling in that work. The Cabinet Secretaries for Health and Social Care and Social Justice will meet with the Equality and Human Rights Commission later today and will be seeking an update on timing of their revised guidance, which is essential to fulfilling the statutory underpinnings of the approach that we take.
Pam Gossel.
I thank the First Minister for that response. Presiding Officer, as mentioned in this chamber earlier this week, I was honoured to attend and witness the UK Supreme Court judgment which provided clarity on what a woman is. Yet some in this chamber refuse to accept it. Whilst it is now the law that biological sex trumps gender identity, self-ID remains central to the SNP government. That is the same SNP government which presided over public bodies suspending nurses for refusing to share changing rooms with biological male colleagues and allowing dangerous male prisoners to be sent to women's prisons. Public bodies need clarity. Every day of delay risks further uncertainty. So can the First Minister give me a clear answer? When will the SNP government be issuing new guidance on compliance with the Supreme Court's judgment?
First Minister.
I give Pam Gossel the assurance that we will develop that guidance in a timely manner. There is a meeting today, as I said in my opening answer, with the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, whose advice we relied upon in the previous guidance that we had in place and whose advice and guidance we will have to rely upon in the future. And the Government will report to Parliament about the progress that has been made in that respect. But I recognise the need for us to put in place timely guidance to apply the judgment that has been arrived at by the Supreme Court.
Michelle Thompson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Public Administration section of the Finance Committee recently met with the outgoing Permanent Secretary, and it was clear from evidence to the committee that the Scottish civil servants are being subjected to internal policies that have not adhered to the public sector equality duty, with women's networks allowing men to self-identify into membership and policies being developed over private spaces where no input was sought around sex as a protected characteristic. Now, the First Minister has made clear that there's now considerable work underway, but will he personally ensure that that work puts women's voices as 57% of the Scottish civil service at the heart of these kind of policies and really make sure that the public sector equality duty is met?
First Minister.
I intend to ensure that the public sector equality duty is met, and we will act, as I have made clear to Parliament in all of my answers on this subject, within the law. Obviously, there was legal clarity given by the Supreme Court last week, and the Government has to consider the details of that ruling to enable it to be applied in taking forward the public sector equality duty.
Ash Regan.
Presiding Officer, the Court of Session ruling against Scottish Borders Council marks yet another legal failure to uphold long-standing protections for women and children, this time involving a primary school child. And it exposes this broader pattern of public bodies disregarding the Equality Act of 2010 and other regulations in place since 1967. The undue influence of activist lobby groups like LGBT Youth Scotland has led to policies breaching single-sex safeguards. All such policies must now be withdrawn. Will public funding finally be withdrawn from organisations that are wrongly advising that gender self-ID is lawful in Scotland when it never has been?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, Throughout this whole discussion, I have made clear that the rule of law must be the central consideration of the actions of government, and that is what we will take forward in all of our judgments. I am aware of the judicial review decision that was announced by the Court of Session yesterday in relation to Scottish Borders Council. That is not a judgment that involves the government, it involves Scottish Borders Council. But of course the government will consider the issues that arise out of that as we consider all aspects of the reform of regulation that is required.
Douglas Ross.
This is a very straightforward question. Does the First Minister believe that a trans woman is a woman? Yes or no?
First Minister.
I have set out that the Scottish Government accepts the judgment of the Supreme Court, which ruled that a woman in the Equality Act 2010 is defined by biological sex.